Welcome to Camp Constitution Radio with your host, Hal Shurtleff. This show is heard on WBCQ The Planet every Monday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is also heard on TuneInRadio.com. You can just put in WBCQ, and it will come up. And also on IPMNation.com, which is a online 24-hour radio show, and that comes out of Concord, New Hampshire, and that is heard every Saturday at 1:30 p.m. And they just play the show like today's show will play Saturday. And also on YouTube, I upload a lot of the radio shows up on our YouTube channel, Camp Constitution, and we're actually getting some good traction on our YouTube channel. And right now we have about 256,000 views. Now I know in the some of the bigger shows they might have 500,000 views per video, but we're making progress, and we're just one little entity in a little corner of the world, and trying to reach out as best we can. But we're getting about maybe 300 to 400 views a day from our eclectic batch of videos dealing with education, the Constitution, Agenda 21, Common Core, history, American history, and some other great topics. And so I'm very proud of that. But it's up to people who watch those videos to share them and to also subscribe to the channel. And the more subscriptions we get, and the more people share our videos, and the more informed people are on these important issues, and of course, the better of everything. We have a Facebook page, Camp Constitution. We try to make it easy. Our website's campconstitution.net. Our Facebook page is Camp Constitution. Our YouTube channel is Camp Constitution. We have a Scribd page too, scribd.com, and guess what that's called? Yep, Camp Constitution. Our Scribd page, I haven't mentioned that too much. I know some folks aren't too happy with the Scribd. I think there might be a fee. Some of the downloads are free, but we have all of the books that we've published, as well as the reprints, are on Scribd. Our camp newspaper, we've archived that, I think, over the last 4 or 5 years. You could also find that on our other website, our regular website. But it's a great, and also the Sam Blumenfeld archives. We are getting lots and lots of views on that. We are averaging a whole lot more than our YouTube channel. Just in a month, we get about 250,000 views. So, and our summer camp. We host a weekend, a day-long summer camp, and this year the camp will be held at the beautiful Toa-Nippie Christian Retreat Center, July 2nd to the 9th. And we hope it's still not too late to register. And some of you who may be listening to the show living a long distance away, we do our utmost to help you get there. If we could carpool, we've got folks coming from Michigan and Virginia, New Jersey, and upstate New York. We could also pick you up at bus stations, train stations, and airports. So this year's guest instructors include Professor Willie Soon, one of the world's top climate realists, Larry Pratt of Gun Owners of America, whom was just at a rally we'll be talking about in a few minutes, and John McManus, and who else we got? Oh, Alex Newman, who was one of the top experts on Common Core. So with that, I want to bring in our guest, Dave Kopacz. Dave, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Hal. Thank you very much for having me on the show today.
Oh, I should have had you on a long time ago. Dave, just a quick introduction. Dave and I think we first met at an End the Fed rally in Boston. In fact, I think it was November, I'm guessing 2009, and it was a very cold November. It was the same day, the date that JFK was assassinated, that anniversary date, November 22nd. And we were passing out materials on the subject of ending the Fed, and that's where I met you. And then I think, in fact, I gave my first Agenda 21 presentation. I think I gave a couple early, like 92 and 93. But you and I were invited to speak to a group, the committee's, what was the name of that group? Mass Liberty Preservation Association, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, on Cape Cod. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I gave the macro aspect of Agenda 21, and you gave the micro. And you were very qualified for that position because you served as a conservation officer in the town of Ware. And usually when you hear the term conservation officer, you think of someone who's going to cause trouble, fine you, want to destroy property rights, but you were just the opposite. You may have been one of the few in that particular field that put the property rights of the individual. And again, property doesn't have rights. People that own property have the rights. But I also want to mention that Dave is the host of the Flag Day and Second Amendment rally. There's been 4 of them since 4 years ago, and we just had it a couple of days ago, Saturday, in Belchertown, Massachusetts, which is western. Well, depends on where. If you live in the Berkshires, it's not western, but if you're, it's a little bit east of Springfield. And it was a great time. There was a couple hundred people there. We had Sheriff Arpaio, I hope I'm pronouncing that name right, the famous sheriff, or infamous if you don't like what he stands for. Larry Pratt was there, Stuart Rhodes of Oath Keepers, and Jeanette Penicum, and some other great, and I said great speakers, and it was me, not so great, and you, and so forth. It was a great time, and I posted some of the pictures and videos already, and one person, I would call him a crank, I won't mention his name. I think we're just Facebook friends. He said, "Oh, you guys should be doing this instead of preaching to the choir. You should be doing this in downtown, Belchertown Center." And I'm thinking, the people that came to that event are the front lines of the freedom movement. This is just a place where we meet to do our thing. It's not like we have to have this. It's an intimate gathering. I mean, there's 200 people there, but we have a barbecue pit. And some people are shooting. You can't just pull out your gun in downtown Belchertown and start shooting at targets. It can't be done. But I say to those people who are critical, and it's okay to criticize things, put up or shut up. I don't know, get involved. A lot of people are first things to point out, oh, you didn't cross that T. You didn't dot that I. You should have said this. You didn't do that. How come you didn't have this? Fine. Why don't you help out? Get off your computer and get out there and start doing things. So, Dave, tell us we only have a half hour, 25 minutes here, but tell us about your experiences as a conservation officer in the town of Ware and how you learned about this thing called Agenda 21.
Sure. Well, I've always had an interest in the environment and the closeness to the environment. I grew up here in this area my entire life, and, my playground was the woods and the watershed of the Quabbin Reservoir. So, there was that natural connection and appreciation. So as I got older and realized I wanted to expand my horizons and employment potential, I went back to college. I did very well in the environmental science and attained my degree. And it started from there. What began as a required internship for college with a local conservation commission ended up with me chairing my own town's conservation commission for almost a decade and being their conservation agent at the municipal level. So, I'm very fortunate in that I got to work in a field that I have a very legitimate and deep interest in. However, at the same time, I am, I consider myself a critical thinker and like to have situational awareness at all times, and not just in the general sense of the political environment, but, with respect to those things that affect the industry that I'm so closely tied to. And you really, if you do legitimate research, cannot help but bump into eventually Agenda 21, but only through what I often describe as a dragnet of unelected bureaucracies. There's very little actual government, people that are elected and hold their hands up and take an oath to be public servants. There's very, very few of those that are running the show. These are all nonprofits here in Massachusetts. We've been so regionalized, and I remind people all the time that regionalization is an essential component of communism. We've been so regionalized that, back in the 90s, for example, they decided the county government was just too big, too corrupt, too expensive, and needed to do away with it. And at the same time, I'm listening to these same people sometimes talking out the other side of their mouth saying, hey, we need a regional approach. We need regionalization. And
well, it's interesting when people on the left complain about something being too expensive, that they're lying because they love to spend other people's money and enhance their power. So really, it wasn't that they had a problem with money being spent. They just had a money of who's controlling the counties.
Well, exactly. Yeah, and their solution usually is to create more government, which creates more costs. And that ripples right through. This is like throwing a pebble into a calm lake. You really can't make one alteration without it rippling through the system. So they make it more expensive, and the regulatory burden is increased. The productivity potential of our private property is going down and shifting to nonprofits and governments. And, there's a sincere disconnection between your average person out there and how wealth is created. And it is through the unique and intimate relationship of property ownership. It is very unique here in the United States, the only place in the world where we have a system that we do. And it's made to work on capitalism, requires property rights are absolute. And we got governments and bureaucracies interfering with that, and it's created a horrible mess out.
Well, you made a point, and you and I gave a number of presentations from, 2012, 2011. We probably gave a couple of dozen presentations, and then a lot of our own, and we still do this, of course. But you said something about private property that really everything, all of our products, all the things that are manufactured, that are grown, that are produced, even the intellectual ideas people have, are usually done on private property. I mean, you don't see too many big potato farms owned by the federal government. You don't see too many factories that are owned by the federal government producing things. It's all done on private property. Yeah. And without it, we are not a free people.
Well, exactly, and that is where wealth is created, is from that right of property ownership, or at least control. The system is developing around us. In some cases, the governments don't actually technically own the property, but boy, they retain control, regulatory control, and just shift the burden of taxation onto the property owner every time they can.
That's really a form of fascism. And when we articulate this message and say this is fascism, some people who don't quite understand, they think of Mussolini and goose-stepping and persecuting people of a different faith. But economic fascism, basically it looks like this. And it's actually a very dishonest perspective. I mean, communism, at least, yes, we know all the government owns everything. We're not lying to you. But fascism, the appearance that there is private property, but the fascist governments, they say, look, you own the property, you own the business, but we tell you who to hire, who to fire, what to pay them, how much to make, what color you should paint the house or the factory, and everything else is up to you. So you basically open the door and shut the door, and you have tons. I mean, regulations. I mean, my wife has a daycare business, in-house daycare business, and the regulations. I mean, the minutia. It says that these government bureaucrats know more than the parents who've raised these children. They're putting their precious children into my wife's possession for every day, 5 days a week. But the people in government, most of them who don't have children, know better than the parents. And that's just one little business. And especially you try to have a farm and you try to grow crops. But you were mentioning, Dave, in the town of Ware, which again is in central or western Massachusetts, there was a farm that became a trust. And can you kind of describe just the insanity of these environmentalists? And by the way, when I say that, I consider you to be a true environmentalist. You have a love of the land, and I'm sure you don't like to see beautiful trees chopped down and a building put in place necessarily. But you do have a love of the land, but you know that the land has to be managed like a garden, or it will be ruined. So what happened here at this particular farm, and how these insane these phony pseudo environmentalists?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we got this very broad situation that is, I think, been engineered, where farms in general are struggling at the point where they really only exist through subsidies, which is just a horrible stranglehold on the industry by government now. But what has happened is the farms all over the country are struggling. And in this case, this farm is no different. The woman that lived there is an older woman. Her husband had passed away. The farm was out of production and basically starting to go foul. It was not being used to its potential. So these land trusts, and here in Massachusetts, we have a land trust for every 2 municipalities. And it might be in that by now. I did this count a number of years ago, but let's just, for the sake of conversation, say we have one land trust for every 2 towns. That's an enormous number of land trusts.
And that's about 150, 160?
Yeah, right around there. And
Massachusetts is what, like the size of the state's like the 40th, from like 8,850, 9,000 square miles. So it's not exactly Alaska or North Dakota.
Right, and when you get over in the Boston area, these are very urban areas, and land trust activity is, intuitively would seem to be at a much, much lower level. So a lot of these are central and western Massachusetts, not to say the East Coast.
Cape Cod, and Nantucket, and then Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard.
Oh, yeah, the coastal areas are the exception to what I just said. But, what happened in this particular case is the tactic of the land trust is often to come up with a sense of urgency. We got, in this case, they said grant window is going to close. We need your approval and support to move forward. And they wanted me to sign off and say that I supported the land trust effort to acquire this particular farm and buy up its development rights, deed restrict them in perpetuity, and to do it in the name of protecting farms for future generations. Now, I at first said I am not categorically opposed to anything because not much has been proposed. I said before I recommend the commission sign off and approve this, I need to see the details of the contract. I need to see the conservation restriction. And they refused. They can't do that. I don't got time. We got to do it now. I opposed this. I was outnumbered. I was the only no vote. I voiced my concerns to the selectmen. They went forward and approved for this grant to be sought after. And later on down the road, exactly as I had warned, I get a draft of the conservation restriction across my desk that actually banned tractors from a farm. Not just tractors, all internal combustion motors. And I flipped out. I went to I called the land trust and I said, is there a chance that you messed up and put the wrong town's name on this? Oh, no, that's it. So I marched my carcass right into the selectman's office, and I said, I told you so. This organization has little to no interest in maintaining this as a farm. They banned tractors from it, and I proceeded to embarrass them as thoroughly as I could and as publicly as I could. I was right, and I don't mind being the only no vote if I'm right in what I'm saying.
That's
and
right.
It's hand out. And I embarrassed them enough, only enough, to take out that particular provision. But every other development right has been wiped out. I watched a pig sit in a 10-by-10 pen with a doghouse for a year just to give the image that it's a farm, so people wouldn't actually laugh driving by the place.
Now, didn't you mention that same piece of property, it had some beautiful hardwood trees, oaks, and a few other trees, and they clear-cut that, so they wanted to put in what they thought were bread pines that were native to the land.
Yes, yeah, it was partially forested. Many of the fields were starting to become overgrown, see junipers and things like that, and crocus firs. But yeah, they pretty much clear-cut the whole area. And now their most recent proposal is they want to go down near the rail trail and carve paths right through the river area, right up to the banks of the river. Now, I happen to know for a fact that one of the higher-ups in this particular land trust was a 14-year veteran on the Conservation Commission in this particular town, and she very adequately set the stage for future efforts here. Now, I know of instances where this same woman would have crucified someone who wanted to do any impact to within 200 feet of the riverfront area zone. And here they are proposing access to it, and I came back again and I resisted. I said, this is an organization who sold a bill of goods to the town that they wanted to make this a farm. Now they want footpaths and all kinds of stuff into an area we are tasked with preserving. And I said, this is not related to agriculture. It is not essential to the production of what's going on here. If they want to do something in the form of paths, I suggest they make it through the farm area and focus on agritourism. Stay out of the riverfront area, and they'll have nothing to do with it. So, these land trusts do not care about the environment. In fact, they, like government, are often the ones that, through their policies and setups, create more impacts than your average person.
It's almost as if these pseudo-environmentalists really know nothing about the environment themselves. Also, there's been a big drive to get rid of the dams around the country. The dams, some of these dams, of course, have been around for 100 years, and there's this very complex ecosystem that's around there. And the dams, I guess they wanted one of the goals of Agenda 21, or what was it, the Wildlands Project, was to restore the United States back to pre-Columbian days.
To unstraighten the rivers as well. So that's part of it, to get rid of these dams. And I think you recall the biodiversity assessment report. They talk about ranchers that the hooves of their cattle artificially compact the soil, dams that are causing interferences with flow, and we got to unstraighten the rivers. So yeah, this is what we see at the United Nations level, and what do we see here now in the municipality? Gobs of money being handed out to remove dams and not a cent available to repair them.
And that generates clean energy too. I mean, it's hydroelectric, it's renewable energy, and they're already there. It's not like they have to do it from scratch. They've been there for a number of years, and it's a very and again, it's like an ecosystem. And you get rid of that, you destroy that ecosystem. But they're not interested, and they're not really interested in this crazy agenda.
Yeah, it was the move to do this here in our area several years ago. And it's very quiet when they push to do these things. The regional guys only pop up in the public arena just enough to make it official, usually for grant purposes, because it's a mandate to have public input. So they very carefully orchestrate and engineer those visioning sessions where this information and formalities are fulfilled. But we had an instance here where they actually wanted to take down a dam, happened to be in my grandfather's backyard, so it caught my attention. And I realized there really wasn't any public awareness. So I went out, I drove down the road, I knocked on every door, and I let them know that, you're free to do what you want or not do anything, but I highly suggest you start paying attention to the papers and showing up at some public meetings. And I told them they're about to turn your backyard into a brook, and the Swift River is just a beautiful cold water fishery. They were going to remove the dam and turn their backyard into a brook that you could hop across, surrounded by a giant mud flat. And I had some of my largest conservation meetings because of it. These people got together. They formed an organization. Many of those people went and joined the land trust in this particular area, and then voted themselves into office. So there are things that you can do. You just got to be politically motivated enough to do it. Put down your remote and get off Facebook and advocate for your own rights and self-interest here. And they did, and they put a stop to it. The senator finally said, nope, we're going to make this right. These are the people that live here, bought their property specifically because they have a beautiful river there, and they're going to leave it in place, but it does have to be repaired. So the state dam inspector came in and issued a big laundry list and deadlines and made it as cumbersome and detailed as possible. But at least we saved this one, and it shows as an example that there are things that people can do to prevent this stuff.
Well, let me ask you, if a lot of people are, even all these years that it's been going on, there's a lot of people that are sort of either not knowing too much about it. And I gave an example. I interviewed Reverend Bruce Wall from Dorchester, inner city Boston, and with its parking lot. And you think, gee, what's a parking lot got to do with Agenda 21? Well, if it's a chunk of land in the inner city, and it used to be pretty much worthless, and that's why the city didn't really care about it. They didn't pave it. They just said, yeah, we'll put a fence around it, and you can be the unofficial caretaker. Well, now that thing's worth $10 million, and the term gentrification is what people in the inner city use. And that's been going on before Agenda 21 was actually introduced. But I tell them it's gentrification on steroids, and I explain to them, and it isn't like I'm some condescending white liberal from the suburbs that tells you, no, it's most people, black, white, or what have you, they don't understand. And we had a success story in Rindge, New Hampshire, just a few years ago when, it was explained to them what was going on, these visionary sessions, or charrettes they call them now. And some people got together, and within 5 months, reversed 4 or 5 years of planning and lots of thousands of dollars with just 2 cents on the dollar. They were able to get it now, and now warn people about it, put stuff on the ballot, get rid of all these proposals, and now they have a group that's a watchdog group that's at all of these meetings. So what's the first step? What do you recommend for people who are hearing this show and really don't know too much about it? In fact, we have a new convert. She was at the meeting there. She met with you. She's from Gloucester, Massachusetts, and she saw some of her old videos, and I think it was a PowerPoint presentation that I used about 5 or 6 years ago. And she said, that's happening in Gloucester, Massachusetts. She said it was happening in Mission Hill and Roxbury, Boston, and now it's happening here. I says, well, now she's tuned to it. So what would you recommend for people who are learning about this for the first time?
Well, there is a very good selection of information on the internet already. Is really hit that and try to wrap your mind around how these international policies trickle down. And once you know the buzzwords, once you've convinced yourself you're being had, the buzzwords begin to appear all over the place and things that you would never imagine. More recently, very good friends of mine who are, in most ways, very close ideologically to me, got wrapped up in an event called Greening the State. This went on this last weekend here, yesterday, as a matter of fact, down in Rhode Island. Now, these are very decent people that got pulled in by the usual propaganda. They missed the buzzwords. As I went to their website, as I figured I would find language like social justice, environmental justice, fixated on the Constitution, realize that there's only one justice, and it's a blind justice. There's no such thing as social.
There's a term now called environmental racism, and it's very, very fascinating. They're so clever that these progressive so-called I call them retrogressives, who are now trying to get people in the inner cities, the minority communities, to promote this agenda, saying that they're victims of global warming. They're the first love. Just the opposite. They want to destroy the inner cities. They want to, turn them into high-rise apartments where they couldn't afford it. They can't afford to live there anymore. They have to move out of the cities, like they're moving out of San Francisco. They're moving out of Harlem. They're moving out of Roxbury and Dorchester and moving to Brockton. And they're relocating their lives. It's not something beneficial, but they get their paid stooges to do this kind of thing. It's really frustrating.
Sure. And you see things happen, what happened with the Kelo case that allowed government basically to steal private property. Well, that's now been blended right in with our regional planners, and they use that tool. And when you go into a town, every town has its armpit. There's bad alleys and drug-infested areas in every town around. And
that's right.
When enough dilapidated buildings and crime and stuff takes place, all the talking heads and the planners get together, and the first thing they propose is a blight or redevelopment zone. And when this is not just generic, ineffectual language, it means something. So to put a zone is only put on something for 2 reasons, and that's really one reason. That's for taxation, but for taxation and control. So,
hey, Dave, we're running out of time here, so let's. How can folks get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more about this? Of course, if you go to YouTube and put in Dave Kopacz, Hal Shurtleff, or Dave Kopacz, Agenda 21, I'm sure a lot of your presentations will come up.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm on Facebook, and I share all my content there. So certainly send me a friend request and reference that you heard me on Hal's show here, and I'll add you right to the list. We're always
and your last name is spelled Kopatz, Kopacz. And if you go to our YouTube Camp Constitution YouTube channel, you will see Dave in action at the rally that we had just a couple of days ago, and some good presentations. And so thanks, Dave, for being on. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to WBCQ The Planet, Camp Constitution Radio with your host, Hal Shurtleff. Until next week, God bless.